In the last movie, we created this basic animated GIF. Now, let's refine this masterpiece a bit. Well, one of the great things about animated GIFs as teaching and learning assets is they are really tiny animations that load almost instantly and can quickly convey a process, a concept, or an idea. However, at over 2 megabytes, this file is not really very tiny. Let's address that first. And to keep your file size as small as possible, keep the total number of frames to an absolute minimum required to create your animation. Currently, we have 16 frames in our animation, and that's really way more than we actually need to pull off this particular effect. Now, ideally, we'd want to get that down to somewhere between 2 and 10 frames, and the smaller the better. Okay, let's get rid of every other frame by clicking on frame 2, then holding down the Command or Control key on your keyboard and clicking on all of the even number frames in your animation. This will select all of those independently. We can then throw them away by clicking on the trash can icon at the bottom of the timeline. You can then preview your animation to see how it looks by clicking the play button. Now that's still looking pretty smooth. At this point, you could remove more frames and see how that looks, but I think we'll stay with this and we'll make some other refinements. Now the animation is playing way too fast. You can control the speed of the playback by changing the length of time that each frame is on screen for here in the lower right corner of each frame. Let's change all of the frames at once though by clicking on the first frame, holding down the Shift key, clicking on the last frame to select them all, and then click the drop down in the lower right of any of those frames to access the timing pop-up window. Now these settings tell Photoshop how long to hold on each frame for before moving on to the next frame, and the values here are all set in seconds. Now initially, this value is set based on the frame rate of the initial video, and for frame rates of around 30 frames per second, each frame is going to be initially set to the 0.03 seconds that you see in the lower corner of every single frame. So let's try a setting of 0.2 seconds per frame, and then preview that to see how it looks. Now that's looking way too slow. Okay, let's split the difference by, once again, selecting all of the frames, clicking on any of the drop-downs, and then this time select Other, and type in a value of 0.08. And then click OK. Now when we preview, I'll press the spacebar. The animation is running at a much better rate. Okay, a few more quick changes. But make sure that all of your frames are selected, so we do this to all the frames at once. Now grab your crop tool, and let's change the aspect ratio for our crop down to a 1:1 or a square crop ratio. Then adjust your crop to find a pleasing layout. Then hit Enter or Return to lock in your settings. Now in your Layers panel, select all of your layers by clicking on any layer, then holding down the Shift key and click on the last layer in the stack. Then drag all of those layers onto the folder icon at the bottom of the layer stack. This will group them all into their own animation group. We can double click and change the name of that group to animation. Now let's give our entire project that blue wash look by adding a color lookup adjustment layer and loading that blue wash LUT that we created in an earlier movie. I copied mine out to my desktop. I'll select it and then open that up. Notice that this was applied to the group and thus the entire layer stack, and therefore our entire animation. Now let's grab our Type tool and choose a font that you like. I'm going to use Chantal, which is a Typekit font available through your Creative Cloud account. Then I'll set my face to medium. I'll set the size to 60 points, make sure it's left align, and then my color is set to white. Then I'll click to add some text and type in, "I don't think so." Then click off to lock in that text. Okay, I think we're there. Let's head back up to the File menu, go down to Export, and select our Save for Web Legacy option. Then adjust the zoom level of your preview with Command or Control minus. In the lower left corner, we can see our current size information for what our export is going to be. Now ideally, we want to get this size down to well under a megabyte. So let's start by dropping our image size setting down to 250 pixels. And that does a pretty good job there. Let's adjust a few of these other settings up here near the top. For this image, we do not need any dithering, so we'll select no dither, and we don't have any transparency, so we'll turn that off as well. Initially, the colors are set to 256. Let's drop that down to 128 and see how that looks. Doesn't look like much has changed. Let's try 64. Again, not much change. Let's try 32. It's starting to get a little crunchy. Let's try 16. And oh yeah, that's looking really awful. Okay, I think the sweet spot for this image was going to be about 64, so I'll reselect that. Now, this is really a trial and error process to find the right combination of settings for your particular animation. You can preview what your animation is going to look like by clicking the play button here at the bottom of the panel. And then when you think everything is good, go ahead and click the Save button. I'll name my file phoebe2.gif and save it to my desktop. Then I'll minimize Photoshop. Here's our two files that we exported. I'll select both of them and then right or control click on them, and on the Mac, I'll select Get Info, and on Windows, you can select Properties. We went from 2 megabytes down to 272 kilobytes. And with the preview of both of these images, it looks like we've made quite a dramatic difference. Now, the direction that you take this for your own teaching and learning assets is really going to depend on your specific needs, but I can't wait to see what you create.